I'm Connor Old, and welcome back to another episode of Masters of Controlled Chaos. And this month, we're looking at arguably the greatest director of all time, Akira Kurosawa. So, if you're new to the series, what I do every single month is I go full deep dive into a director. I talk about the central idea of what makes them great. I also look at what I consider their best movie, my favorite movie of theirs, and then an underrated one. Now, you may be first thinking, Connor, you have a new set. Yeah, I'm in a new place. The past couple videos I've done at my home, which you've seen since the start. But before that, of course, I was in my dorm room. Now I'm in my house, my new house, should I say. And the second thing you may be thinking of is, Connor, why haven't you covered Akira Kurosawa yet? He's arguably the greatest director of all time, but you've done, almost like 25 Masters of Controlled Chaos videos, but you haven't, covered this great guy. And I think for a lot of reasons, it was very daunting to me. He's a director who has sometimes 3.5 hour black and white movies. I mean, they're foreign language movies. They're in a different language. I think he's a daunting director for a lot of people, including myself. It's much easier to say watch a Brian De Palma, who's they're 70s movies. I've seen some of them. I like them. But Akira Kurosawa, I haven't seen really any of his movies, which is why I did the tie-in with Seven Samurai. But I wanted to go through it, and I'm so glad I did because I saw some amazing movies. I'm a fan of Akira Kurosawa now, and I definitely think he's one of the greatest directors of all time. I'm not sure if he's the greatest because his movies are so different, but I think that's sort of what makes him unique in that same sense. And really for me, the big standout for his movies was how he was able to combine art and entertainment. He's great at combining things, and art and entertainment, because entertainment first and foremost. I think most movies should be entertaining at the very core of them, but they also should be sort of artistic, and they're entertaining because he's able to create and sort of take classic stories and have a really interesting sort of take the structure of them or use them for a plot-wise to sort of keep you going on. You are emotionally invested in these characters. There's great dialogue. There's an interesting story to keep you along. But it's what he brings to the table that makes it more artistic. He's totally a master of controlled chaos because his vision is complete. You can tell that throughout his movies. He has a style, yes, but he doesn't have too much of an imprint on his movies that you would immediately recognize them from a visual cue. Say something like even David Fincher or Wes Anderson, directors we've covered before. But like those guys, or like Wes Anderson, he has a group of actors that he works with. He works with Toshiro Mifune and Takashi Shimura. Those are sort of the two big ones that he works with a lot. And really is able to combine a lot of things together into an ultimate art form. I think that, why he loves cinema, and he said this before, is because it's a combination of so many different art forms. He's able to take his painting, he was a painter before being a director, so take his experience from there. He takes classic literature works like adaptations of Shakespeare or Dostoevsky, and then even down to the editing. He's a total artist of his movies, and that's why I think they feel so connected, not necessarily in a visual sense, but because of actors and just the way he tells his stories are always engaging. And he always says he likes to start with a great screenplay, a great story, which is why he adapts from these great literature sort of writers throughout history, because he knows that if you have that sort of foundation, that really great foundation of a story, of a plot that sort of keeps the audience engaged and emotionally invested throughout the movie, then you can add your sort of expertise on top of that. And his expertise, I think, really in terms of visually, at first foremost you can tell, is his framing. Sometimes they seem almost unintentional, but they're so intentional because he was a perfectionist. He definitely, it's not uncommon. It's not a mistake, as you would say, because it's a trend throughout all his movies. Something like High and Low, where people are faced certain ways, so there's not a lot of overlap. Something like in Ran, where we see the old man, be so shocked with the fire going on behind him. Even as he turned into more of his color films, he was able to bring something wholly unique and different in another layer, which made it even more interesting, which was the different colors. It's these visual cues that make it different than the literature. He's not just adapting a play of Shakespeare. He's making it cinematic by using the camera and making it seem that this way that he's trying to tell the story could only be done through the cinematic art form. That comes with framing. It also comes with the performances. Like I said, he works with Toshiro Mifune and Takashi Shimura often, and those guys, particularly Toshiro Mifune, which has always been his leading man in most of his movies, are super important because he's able to get great performances out of them. Yes, they are great actors, but they always go back to Akira Kurosawa because they know that they're going to push them to their limits to really allow them to get the best performances. And he also knows what performances are the best and make them look the best in the best sort of way, in the best light. So not only the framing and the way he deals with the actors, but ultimately it's his decision making, and that comes in the editing room. He is one of the few directors that he also edits his movies, similar to Joel and Ethan Coen, and he knows which take is best. He knows how to sort of lay out a film and how to tell that story throughout, and it really is incredible in that sense because, you know, there's video essays online that I watched about how Star Wars was influenced and sort of changed in the editing room, and drastically, because there's so many different ways how you introduce certain elements. It can very much, if you do them in an odd order, it can confuse the audience. And the way he does, the way his movies are always entertaining, is because how he edits his movies, the storyline is all the way through. Even in a 3.5-hour movie, something like Seven Samurai, he is able to create these incredible images and, you know, sequentially put them in a certain order to tell and send a certain message. Rashomon does this beautifully, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But really, he's able to do so many different things with his editing and really make a seamless story added on top of the framing. And actually, it's almost kind of hard to say what Akira Kurosawa does amazing or different, because he does everything amazing, really. He starts with this incredible foundation of the screenplay and then adds on top of it with getting incredible performances and then, you know, beautiful, incredible framing that you could put as a painting anywhere, and then all the way down to the editing process where he knows how to tell a story and which way would be the best to service the movie and service the performances. But another thing I noticed about Akira Kurosawa were how modern his movies were. And that was really a big lesson for me, because there's this thing that sort of persists across the old on old series, which is, you know, a lot of these movies I've seen before, quote unquote seen, but I hadn't, because I've seen sort of reiterations or remakes of the original. So when I go back to the original, will it hold up? Because this is not my first time seeing it, as it were, for the audiences of the time. Of course, you have to keep historical context in account, or something like in Halloween, where I don't think it works. That's because that's the horror genre, because the horror genre is so particular and totally about the scare. So when you know the scares, it doesn't work, and so the movie doesn't work as well. What this Akira Kurosawa sort of series and deep dive really taught me was that these stories do work. I saw the original Magnificent Seven, the remake, and then I saw the original Magnificent Seven, and then I saw, you know, Seven Samurai, and I think of all those, Seven Samurai is great. It's the best. You know, I'd say Bug's Life, though, is pretty up there too. I do like Bug's Life, but it really taught me something like High and Low, or Hidden Fortress, which is like Star Wars. I've seen Star Wars, I hadn't seen Hidden Fortress, but what Kurosawa was able to do, and I was really trying to get that pulse, and I think I was able to do it, is that he's able to take these great stories and make them the best possible way, and make them truly cinematic, and make them truly his own through the incredible performances and through the way he tells the story and that great framing. Like I said, so, you know, there's so many different ways where, you know, he almost nails it on the first try, so that every sequential remake or reiteration doesn't work as well. So it's great to go back and see that, wow, these stories that I thought I knew were well done are actually so much better and so much more creatively well done in the Kurosawa films. It really is sort of a revelation for me in that sense, and it was really fascinating. And I mentioned Hidden Fortress and Star Wars. Kurosawa was a huge influence on so many modern day directors, and I totally see why. And he actually, without you maybe even realizing it, is the creator of the modern day action movie. His movies still feel modern, they still feel relevant, because he was the first to sort of lay out this template. Seven Samurai talked about sort of the atypical bringing the team together. Would that be Magnificent Seven or Ocean's 11? Or you look at something like High and Low, which is the hostage situation, the kidnapping, something like Inside Man. We've seen this story before, but the way he does it, the way he sort of creatively goes about telling the story and keeping the audience engaged throughout the movie, is unlike any other director. And you can see his imprint throughout all action movies, whether they know it or not. And I think that's just an incredible feat by Akira Kurosawa. He's a great director because not only because he does these sort of action movies, which I would sort of describe his career into two parts. There's the action movies, and then there is the crime thrillers, or the humanist films, or the dramas. But no matter the grandness of the movie, no matter the scale, he's always able to find personal, unique things that make the stories feel intimate. Even in the samurai films versus his most intimate human dramas, they both have that sort of intimate feel, which is so incredible. Movies like Gladiator, I think, do a really great job of that. But then I look at something like Seven Samurai, or Kagemusha, or Ran, or even, Sanjuro, which are movies that really take these grand issues but boil them down into just humanist sort of dramas, which Shakespeare was able to do, and great literaries were able to do before him, and Kurosawa does now here. Arguably the best ever in the cinematic medium, and I think he is truly a master of controlled chaos, because despite all his great things, and he brings everything together to make it feel truly his own. And even though he might not be your favorite director, I don't think he's my favorite director, but I keep on thinking about him. Despite that, I still think you can't agree that his movies are not his own. They most definitely are his own, and I think that it's the little moments in the film that, and in his filmography, that really add up to the whole, the sum of everything. And he's an incredible director. Unlike, similar to Hitchcock or Kubrick, never won an Oscar, won an honorary Oscar, but that doesn't really count. And sort of never made an English film, always the Japanese movie, and stayed in his realm. And it was a great sort of collaboration with his love of American movies and his appreciation of Japanese culture, where he's from. Of course, he was able to combine them into this amazing movie, which is why I think I totally recommend to watch Akira Kurosawa movies, because they feel modern, they feel almost westernized. They just have subtitles, and maybe they're black and white, but even if you go into the colorful films, you really have a sense of incredible storytelling that no matter what. You can read, Charles Dickens, which was written, over 100 years ago, but the story's still there. And I think Kurosawa focuses on the story, brings what makes him great, his painting background, his incredible way to edit and tell the story sequentially, and makes an incredible movie, incredible movies. He's made many masterpieces. He really is a great director. I'm a fan of him now, for sure, for life, and I think he's an incredible director. But now let's move over into what I consider his best movie, Rashomon. So it was almost hard for me to choose what the best Akira Kurosawa movie is, because they're all so different and they all have so many different themes that they tackle. But ultimately, I probably would have went with Seven Samurai, but this just gives me another chance to talk about Rashomon, which is I think is another incredible movie, and an almost near perfect movie. And now this movie the plot of it is a sort of murder mystery where we hear the different tellings of a murder that happened from 4 different people. There's the bandit, there's the woman, there's the samurai, who is the woman's, I guess, husband, and then there's the woodcutter. There are people that are in it. There's the vagabond or the priest, but we don't know. They don't tell their stories, or they weren't there to witness the events. They're sort of just to be in the background. And this type of movie where we see unreliable narrators and multiple versions of the same story, I've seen before. I've seen The Usual Suspects. So I was hesitant at first to watch it, but really was enthralled by how this model works, and then also looking at the historical context of this being the first. It's actually known as the Rashomon effect, this idea of the unreliable narrator and multiple versions of the same story. And I think Kurosawa, particularly his editing, is on display here. Of course, you have Toshiro Mifune's incredible performance that really put him on the map and showed him as this crazy character that he can sort of later plays on into Seven Samurai. But really, I think the editing, because of how he tricks us into thinking certain things. Now, let me explain. The way he lays out the movie, he takes the quote-unquote most morally correct, most morally incorrect sort of person lets them go first, and the bandit, and then the most morally correct person who goes last, which is the woodcutter. Now I say this because that's the way he tells us the events are. You know, you're not supposed to trust the bandit because his name is the bandit, or the woodcutter. He's just an innocent woodcutter, and we see the woodcutter at the very beginning of the movie find the murder, which leads us to this whole thing. And what I love about the movie, as he's telling us these stories, is how he's able to allow us to be the juror. We are peeking in. We get to decide at the end of the day who we believe and who we don't believe. And the genius of this movie really is in the ending, because there is no resolution. We don't know what the truth is. You know, in the murder mystery, you know, usual suspects will be twisted. Oh, it was actually this person who did that. You know what I mean? The drop of the pen. But in Rashomon, there is no answer, because I think what Akira Kurosawa was trying to say is that this movie isn't about truth and finding the truth, and it's really about dishonesty and egos and trying to make yourself seem better than you are, and what the human spirit is willing to do, and especially lying. And you know, you look at some of these characters, every one of their stories are so wildly different. I think it's evident to show that these people have different versions of the outlooks of life, yes, but also they're trying to alter their stories to make them look like they're the victim, to make them look like, or they're the hero, or they had nothing to do with it, right? And it's up to us to try to figure out the different details. Now, the bandit goes first, which is the sort of, you may think, oh, the bandit, I'm not going to trust this guy, you know, he's the suspected murderer, right? But because he goes first, he tells us so many different events, so that when these sort of details pop up in the next couple stories, we know that, oh, maybe he was telling the truth, which tricks our brain. And then the woman who sort of cries to gain sympathy. And then the dead husband who comes up, and the samurai, and he's all about honor, and he died an honor's death. He didn't die, he killed himself, you know what I mean? It was on purpose, right? He doesn't want to seem like weak. So there's so many different things that Kurosawa is trying to say, and I think it mostly is about the human spirit, and what the human spirits do to save their own butt, and to kind of stroke their ego in that sense. Yeah, there's so many different interpretations of this movie, but I think Kurosawa, because he doesn't give that ending, is so crucial. And there is the ending that I don't really like, of how there's the baby at the end, and the woodcutter saves it to take take him to his family, which shows him maybe he's the most morally correct person, but that doesn't necessarily get him off the hook. He's still a possible sort of suspect, and maybe this guy, you know, did something. You know, there's his little reactions in the back as you hear these people tell their stories, him and the priest, and I also see the priest and the vagabond, which are him when he's telling the whole story to the audience by the Rashomon gates, which is where the title comes from, as the sort of devil and the angel, that the priest is sort of this morally correct person, and then the vagabond sort of this, I don't care about the rules, I live my life, I'm not really worried about other people and other people's viewpoints, and it's sort of the debate. And I think that's why the woodcutter, even though he seems like the most morally correct person, he still is in that gray area, and this movie is in that gray area. Kurosawa does a great job, like I said, with the editing. The framing is gorgeous, especially the setting, the decisions that Kurosawa made with the setting, and how he lights the setting of the forest. It's incredible, because the mysterious in itself has the almost fable, fairy tale-esque feeling to it, because we are so disoriented when we go into the forest. We don't know where we are. So, with that use of shadows, he uses the sun peering through the forest to create these shadows across the face. So you see a shadow of black, and then a shadow sort of the light, and it will go across the face in this sort of unconventional style of lighting, and sort of all over the place. You don't want shadows going across people's faces, it looks bad, but what it does, it creates the gray. There's the light and there's the dark, and it goes across, because we don't know when they're telling the truth, we don't know when they're lying. Now, there are theories or whatnot, the little clues that Kurosawa did leave that are, you know, enticing, but we don't know, and I don't think I'm going to focus on what the truth really is, because I think that's fun and all, but it's not what he's trying to say. He's trying to say, look at all these people, and look how their stories are so different, And we don't know the truth, and we won't know the truth. We just know what the human spirit is capable of doing, and they're lying to save their own butts. And the idea of tricking yourself almost into being so emotionally invested in this story, into this lie that you've created yourself just to make yourself feel better. Why can't we? Kurosawa's almost asking himself, and asking the audience, why can't we just tell the truth? Why can't people be honest with one another? And it's the idea of greed. It's this sort of self-serving and sort of part of our humanity that we can't get rid of, and selfishness is almost a part of us, and it's so hard to get rid of it because it's so ingrained in our DNA. And Kurosawa is asking us a lot from the audience, and I think just this disorienting forest is a great setting to show the disorienting sort of the truth of the story, where we don't know where we are in the forest, we don't know where we are in the truth. So despite it having all these ideas of the truth, I still think that it lures you into saying, oh, what's the idea? What's the idea? Like so many murder mysteries. But then it removes the ending of the satisfaction of the truth and allows you, A, to try and figure it out on yourself, but also to think, oh, wait, this is just a bunch of liars lying. And that's why I took away with it, the idea that it's these people and their egos, and Kurosawa was just asking the audience as to why can't we just tell the truth? Why can't things be simple? But they're not. They're not black and white. They're gray, and Kurosawa has so many of these great sort of images throughout the movie, and I think it's an incredible movie. You should definitely check it out. It actually, and a little bit of a historical fact, it won the Golden Lion at Venice, and it was the creation of the Oscars foreign language film category. So a little bit of an old Oscar countdown, a little tidbit for you there for Rashomon. But an awesome movie, really accessible, hour and a half. Well, actually one of the first movies I think I'd recommend someone to watch for a Kurosawa film. But now I'm going to move over into what I consider my favorite movie of his, which is High and Low. So why High and Low when there's so many great Kurosawa movies? Well, I think for this movie, and really all of his movies, but this one in particular, it feels super modern. It feels like it could definitely be released today. But that being said, I've also seen this movie before. I've seen something like Inside Man, this sort of hostage kidnapper scenario. But what Kurosawa does is changes it up on you. Just when I think it's going one way, he does something else. Just when I think it's supposed to be shot one way, he does different techniques. He does different ways to tell the story and keep the audience engaged. And this entire movie is almost an exercise in trying to engage the audience, and I was so emotionally invested by the end of this movie. It was almost exhausting by the end of it, but because I was so engaged, because I was gripping my seat so hard, you know what I mean? I really was. It was one of the most engaging movies I've ever seen, and I just really loved it for that. But I love particularly how Kurosawa split this movie almost into two different types of movies. The first half creates this incredible sort of scenario of there's this man who his butler's son has been kidnapped. They thought it was his son, but unfortunately it was his butler's son. But they still want the money from this guy. He just has been trying to buy stocks from his company and has refinanced all of his assets. So if he were to give this money up, he'd lose everything. His house, his fortune, everything. His family even. Or he doesn't give the money and keeps all of that. And there's all these moral questions that Kurosawa asks, because you may think, oh, well, obviously, you shouldn't help the kid, whatever, screw the kid, right? But then the moral question is, well, you have to help this kid. This is his butler for a long time. There is sort of a emotional connection to him. And then there's that's the right thing to do, but the right thing to do is hard. And a lot of times, the right thing to do is hard. It's hard for him to do that. And the way Kurosawa does this first act, I thought was going to be the entire movie. This sort of kidnapping thing, this moral dilemma, played out like a play, but well done cinematically, so I'm not too mad. Actually, I liken this to a movie like Doubt. Doubt does this really well, where it's a play, but it makes it cinematic, where something like Fences doesn't. And Doubt uses the incredible background and the scenery, something like All About Eve does as well, that uses great use of the setting and the framing and blocking, particularly like John Ford, to say a message. And this one has incredible blocking. The camera for Kurosawa is very steady for the most part in this first half of the movie, but there's incredible blocking. Certain people are turned certain ways. It conveys this incredible sense of claustrophobia and just the conflictedness of left or right or left or right. There's all these different paths that you can take, but there's not all these different paths. There's left, there's right, but there's so many different outcomes of the paths you don't know. There's questions like, would he actually kill the kid? Do you want to risk that by saying no? What are the PR issues that affect the company if he does or does not do it? are you willing to risk everything to do the right thing? And I think that's a really interesting question that Kurosawa brings and creates instant emotional tension. And Toshiro Mifune goes back and forth, and he has a great performance in this movie. But then, once they have the police chief in, and then, spoilers but not spoilers, they give away the money. That's what they end up deciding to do. And the movie turns in a complete 180. Before, we were on the defensive. We were in this room waiting for the calls and trying to figure out what's going to happen, what to do. Now we're on the offensive. Now it's a different crime movie. We're on a race for time now. It's a cat and mouse kind of thing. And they really sort of figure out this, and they take everyone, and it really becomes about doing the right thing and trying to represent justice in the right way to catch this criminal, because it's the right thing to do, no matter how much people it takes to do it. This guy has, 2 million yen, I think it was. He's going to get away. So it becomes sort of a conflict of, you have the Toshiro Mifune's character and those guys sort of going after it, and there's the police, Tetsuya Nakari, who is trying to help, and Toshiro Mifune, and really understands his plight and really wants to redeem him for that and do the best thing he can, because it was so hard on Toshiro Mifune to make that decision. He gave away everything for this decision. And then the police has to make sure, in an honorable way, that maybe people don't trust them today, but I think they do a pretty good job of trying to help them, trying to say, we need to help this guy out. And I think the second half of the movie becomes, we're on the offensive, and we're trying to find this guy, and it becomes very different in terms of the framing style as well. At the beginning, it was very sort of subtle, and there was not a lot of camera movements. Now there's much more camera movements, and things, even if the simple dialogues are frantic, people are moving in the background. There are more people. There are so many journalists. There are so much more policemen than just the few that were in the room. It's spread across the entire city. It's like trying to find a needle in a haystack. But guess what? You got a lot of people looking, and you're searching, and searching, and searching, and searching. So there's so many different ways that Kurosawa builds tension in this movie, when it's just simple and it's asking you the moral questions, and that single ring, the sound effect of the phone call is so tense. And then it's the next part where it's a race against time. This guy's going to spend money. This guy's going to try to flee the country. We need to find this guy, and fast, or else his money's gone and this kidnapper is still on the streets. The sense of justice. But really, like I said, I never knew where this movie was going to go, and I think Kurosawa does this great job, and I talk about this in this particular scene that I really loved in the movie, where Kurosawa takes in the sort of typical format and flips it on its head, where at the first we get the phone call and it's the kidnapper, and it's just a shot of Toshiro Mifune and the kidnapper. Maybe other movies would show a mysterious shot of the kidnapper and a shot of Toshiro Mifune just listening on the phone, or other people, or reaction shots. He doesn't do that for the first one. He just does the shot of Toshiro Mifune. And then we wait for him to call again to give more specificities. So we hear that sound of the phone ringing, and then the police are here, so they record the conversation. Okay, you can pick up the phone. And he picks up the phone, and there's a cut. And we don't hear the conversation until and then there's a sort of like a fade, and then we start hearing the conversation. But as we see the frame, we see Toshiro Mifune not on the phone. We hear the recording of the conversation, and we hear the police analyzing it. So it's just that interesting jump in time, which is probably an hour later, as they're still analyzing it, just to tell us a different way, so we can have Toshiro Mifune, the look on his face, reliving the experience, conflicted, walking back and forth, pacing, as we hear this message, and the police trying to figure out, okay, what does this mean? Where is he? Trying to figure out the location. Really just unique, really creative stuff that Kurosawa does here, and I think it's probably my favorite Toshiro Mifune performance because of how conflicted he is, because of how much sympathy he brings to the role, and how he has these sort of little bursts of intensity. He's not the crazy, insane man that goes full off, It's almost like Jack Nicholson. You want the little burst of energy and the little burst of anger. You don't want the full thing, right? And I think he does his best here, where he has this little burst of anger and energy, like he does, but he's contained for the most part. He's thinking. And the movie really, especially the first half, allows it to be contemplative. It allows you just to sit and think of this moral question and put yourself in those shoes. What would you do in that situation? What is the right thing to do, but what is the thing you would do? It's, ethics versus morals. Ethics is, you should, of course, give the money, but morals, will you end up doing it? You say it, you would do it, but in practice, would you actually? really interesting moral questions that brings up here. Fascinating stuff that I've always been attracted to. But it's not my underrated. It was going to be my underrated because some people don't consider it one of Kurosawa's masterpieces. I do, personally. But I went with underrated Drunken Angel. I did this because it doesn't really get talked about too much, and it has incredible performances. That's really the standout here between Toshiro Mifune and Takashi Shimura. Am I got that right? Excuse me. Yes, Takashi Shimura. Just want to make sure I got that right. Those are sort of two of his frequent collaborators. And what Kurosawa does here is just lets them act. Toshiro Mifune is unrecognizable as this character, and there's these two great characters where on the surface they're black and white, but underneath they're almost the opposite, and they're flawed characters asking for forgiveness. And you get to decide as an audience member if they deserve the forgiveness. You know, there's this doctor who, played by Takashi Shimura, who is, you know, supposed to help people, but he's also an alcoholic. He has his problems. Then there's the Yakuza, who on the surface, you know, the doctor's supposed to be good on the surface, and the Yakuza is supposed to be bad, which is like the Japanese gangster. Supposed to be bad on the surface, who's played by Toshiro Mifune. But underneath, you can tell there's just this young kid that just is angry with the world, angry with how things are, really wants to make a change, and is turned to the Yakuza as a scenario. So you see these deeply flawed characters, but ultimately redeemable characters, help each other and help them through a bad time as this man deals with the inevitability of tuberculosis, TB, which is a really tough disease. And we see sort of the incredible intense scenes that we've seen, unlike any other Kurosawa movies, between these two incredible actors and some of their best performances with Toshiro Mifune and Takashi Shimura going at one another, really intense scenes. See it just for the acting because it is incredible. It's got the humaneness of Akira, it's got the crime aspect of High and Low, and has incredible acting from these two of the best Kurosawa actors, and it's actually a great way to sort of end cap your Kurosawa experience. If you've seen the big ones, but you haven't seen one of these, check this one out because you'll really appreciate sort of the way Toshiro Mifune looks and is so young in this movie versus Takashi Shimura, and they're incredible sort of going at one another. It's like two titans of film really going at one another. Awesome, great to see. But anyways, guys, for all those reasons, that's why Akira Kurosawa is a master of controlled chaos. Make sure you like the video. Comment below, let me know some of your favorite Akira Kurosawa movies, and if you want me to cover anyone on next month's Masters of Controlled Chaos. But anyways, guys, I'm Connor Old. Until next time, stay tuned.